Welcome to the November 25th, 2024 April 4th Coalition show. The April 4th Coalition their mission statement is we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights, and we're against tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship our jobs overseas. We're very lucky to have Michael Wilbur and Rachel Branch here with us today, and we're going to review some of the things that we talked about last week, but we're also going to touch on some new things also. We support all the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but we underscore Article 23. So, number one, everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment. Number two, everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work.
Number three, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for herself and himself and her and his family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection.
Number four, protection. Everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his or her interests.
Thank you, Michael.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Just remind you, the sign we have behind us, poverty is the enemy. You know, that's our focus. That's, you know, rather than getting in arguments with people about this or that, we just want to keep that focus, that poverty is the enemy, and we're for the elimination of poverty. And, Kamala Harris wasn't the first Harris that I voted for in a presidential election or in a primary that lost a presidential election. And in 1976, that was the first presidential election that I could participate in. And it was our bicentennial year. And I had a candidate, and his name was Fred Harris. And I read yesterday, unfortunately, that at 94 years old, Fred Harris passed away. He was an advocate for the poor. He was from Oklahoma. He was a senator. But he advocated for workers. And I got a little clip when he was in New Hampshire speaking on his behalf with his wife, LaDonna, about his campaign. So I thought, just out of respect for him, I'd like people to see what he was talking about in 1976. And we'll see if it's relevant today.
If there's any doubt in anybody's mind, we hope. Both the economy and the politics of our country are in deep trouble. Too few people have all the money and the power, and most people have little or none. Yet, you and I have a rare chance in 1976 to help return America to its most traditional principle, the right of all of our people to a fair chance and a fair share by their own efforts. What stands in the way is privilege. Privilege is the issue. It prevents full employment and fair taxes. It drives up prices and corrupts democracy. The basic question in 1976 is whether our government will look after the interests of the average family or continue to protect the super rich and the giant corporations. I'm a candidate for president. I'm a candidate because I want to make a difference in our country. And I will enter the Democratic primary in New Hampshire. LaDonna and I are deeply grateful for the warm friendship and support which we've found here in New Hampshire already. This campaign will be a people's campaign, both in strategy and in beliefs. The strategy is simply this: we will go to the people. The beliefs are these: people are smart enough to govern themselves, and a widespread diffusion of economic and political power ought to be the express goal of government.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds like it's very relevant today to me, and there it is, income inequality. There's your poverty right there on the line. So since 1976, gee, we'll have to look to 2026 to see if that can be unraveled by the people. But yes, it's amazing, and it's sad to hear him speak that way and know that the same thing and worse is going on now.
Right,
I
it's
believe.
just
Yeah.
escalated. The
Yep.
power is getting into fewer and fewer hands.
Yep.
And the rich are richer and richer.
Mm-hmm.
And we often try to remind ourselves of what Martin Luther King said when he was trying to eliminate poverty. He said he had nothing against people getting rich.
Mm-hmm.
He said it was fine if people got rich, but if they just agreed to not get rich so quickly, if they would just slow down that process, that they had to grab everything, if they could share some of that while they were getting richer with those at the bottom, we could raise everybody up. And our tax system is the way we can do that. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like our tax system is going to be reflecting that.
I guess I just extend what Martin Luther King said, and I do have a problem with the rich becoming rich if everybody else isn't also living with a livable wage and waste, all the things that go into that. But
So you
just
think there's-
being rich on itself.
Right.
And of course, you've heard me say, if you come from great wealth, you have a responsibility to your community. And
Right.
you have to use your blessings that way, because nobody has any choice about where they're born.
No, it's, I harken back to, I think, Huey Long and Jesse Jackson used the same analogy, that if you were to have a picnic, or let's say a Thanksgiving Day dinner, happy Thanksgiving to everyone, and you laid out all the food, and you had 100 guests at your table, and then 4 people came and took 96% of all the food, and left 4% left for the other 96 people. Like, you tell them, hey, put some of that grub back on the table. Well, everybody's got to have some. And that's what we're asking for, Don't take all of it,
And it's so starkly evident today all around the world. I mean, it's heartbreaking. And I never thought I would be saying food used as a weapon of war. I never thought even to even think
Starvation.
about that. Starvation.
Medical care.
Yeah.
It's just horrible. It's horrible,
And no homes.
And we're supposed to be advancing.
Yep, I guess we're not.
One thing he talked about in his speech, Fred Harris, was about the diffusion of economic and political power, meaning bringing the power back lower, so there was more input.
Well, you have to look at those who are in the position running those. There's too many, mostly men, in positions of power singularly. So that's centralized power. And that's very dangerous for any one person. And of course, it goes against everything the United States is supposed to be about. For any one person to have all that power in their own hands. Nobody. In our government, even. That's why we have 3 branches of government. And of course, a lot of that's even Congress giving up power to the executive branch over the years. There are so many things that we do not even have equal branches of power now.
No.
And the glut in the Supreme Court itself is quite frightening.
Well,
of course, then you and I will talk about term limits.
The Citizens United decision
Oh,
of the Supreme Court, which allowed unlimited spending on campaigns, that is the true victim of this last election.
Yep.
Was the American taxpayer, the American citizen. Because, when one individual can throw $40 million, $50 million at one campaign or another, we give our what meager amounts we can donate, we can't compete with that amount of money. It's just
Well, even
there's
the-
no need for that.
Both sides, even
Right.
both parties. I think there are real problems in both parties. But I will
Exactly.
go back to the 1980s trickle-down economics, which is an absolute joke. That contributed so much to poverty, and what we see today is the outcome of where that's, from what I believe, where that started.
Exactly.
The trickle-down economics.
Right,
And-
that you can cut taxes for the rich.
Yeah.
And then the poor will reap the benefits eventually. It'll
Mm-hmm.
trickle down if you live long enough. And we know that's in our
It
mission.
won't trickle down, because it hasn't trickled
No,
down. in,
that's
what,
right
50 years?
right in our mission statement. They were
Yeah.
against tax breaks for the rich.
Yeah.
But right now, rather than looking at the powerful and those that are very wealthy, some politicians deflect that and point the finger and say, no, the problem's over here. It's that immigrant.
Oh, yeah.
It's that illegal person coming into the country. They're the problem. They're the reason why you're in poverty. They point the finger that way. And
Or they look at those on Medicare and Medicaid, the vulnerable, the elderly, disabled. Those are the problem because, Medicare is only covering 80%. Why isn't it covering 100%?
Right. It should be expanded.
And using that and running the fear of Social Security is going to run out, please.
Right.
That
That's-
could be reinforced and restabilized
Right,
and paid back the trust account.
Well, that's another quote that we often
Yeah.
use, and it's probably good to think about during Thanksgiving. Gandhi's quote about, the misguidedness of materialism, where, that there's only a certain amount of goods to go around, and so you have to get yours. And because if you don't get yours, someone else is going to get it, and you'll be without. And Gandhi said that there's enough for all of our needs, but there's never enough for all of our greed. And that's
And I always say there's no limit to greed.
Yeah.
Somebody who's greedy, there's never enough for them.
No,
And they
that's-
do it at the expense of so many people.
and there's a
who-
Taoist saying about that: not knowing what is enough is worse than a natural disaster.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Now, when we were talking about people being pointed the finger at, immigrants or illegal immigrants, I wanted
Which
to
seems
harken
to be
back.
a misnomer, too.
Right.
Human beings
Some of
are
us are illegal. We're all human, and we all, have God within us, no matter where you're born. But there was last week we concentrated on Emma Lazarus, and there was one video that was 12 minutes long that we didn't get to show, and we wanted to show it today because I think we still have to underscore the need of inclusion, people
I think
all
this is-
around the world. And this is an educational video, and it's challenging us to come up with what we would write at the bottom of the Statue of Liberty.
I think this
So-
is beautiful. I'm so glad you're showing it.
Let's look at this video about Emma Lazarus.
Keep ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. 1883, written in aid of the Bartholdi statue.
What we found in the last year, as we've been thinking more and more about Emma Lazarus and her legacy, is that a lot of people really don't know who she is. She's most famous for writing a poem called The New Colossus, which is now inside the Statue of Liberty. And as we were exploring her biography, we were able to see that she led such a complex life that actually sheds light on the complications that I think we're living through today. So we felt looking at how Emma dealt with these issues would be inspiring for a new generation.
How did Emma act in the world? And how did she express herself and shine light on issues important to her?
This poem is saying no matter where you're from or what your circumstances, there is no such thing as a good immigrant or a bad immigrant. Everyone deserves here. And I think that idea, that very idea, is radical. It was radical then, and I think it's radical now.
Emma Lazarus was born in New York City in 1849. She was a fifth-generation American from a very well-known, established Jewish Sephardic family.
She grew up for much of her life in a beautiful brownstone on 14th Street. She was the fourth of 7 children, so she grows up in a lively household, one in which education was valued, so she most likely was tutored in her library.
She spoke French and German. She did translation from French and German literature. And by the time she was 16, her father was able to pull together a 200-page volume of her poems.
It's very uncommon to have someone be able to write so much, but she kind of lived and breathed letters.
New York changed a great deal from her childhood to her adulthood. From 1840 to 1860, the population more than doubled.
You have a lot of people moving from rural areas to the city. More and more people are working in factory jobs, and there's an awareness at the time of inequality. There are some people living in quite beautiful homes, and others who are living in tenements. And in addition, you have immigrants moving in. So all of these things are at play in the world that Emma grew up in. One thing that happens in the course of her lifetime is that there's actually an uptick in anti-Semitism. There are people who are saying Jews as a class, Jews as a whole, are X, Y, and Z. And so there were a lot of stereotypes, just as there were stereotypes of many immigrant groups at the time.
She was always the Jewess, wherever she went. Even her best friends spoke about her as one of the strivers. There was coded language and not so coded language when they were writing among themselves. And we have those letters because her friends were famous people. So we can see what they were saying behind her back. And it's not pretty. She had been writing about Jews. She had been writing about her own ancestors. And when the pogroms happened in Eastern Europe in 1881, Emma Lazarus was already churning with the questions about how to be a modern Jew and what it meant to live in two worlds. Emma Lazarus was the first modern Jew in the sense that she was the first famous American Jew who had to invent her own way of being Jewish.
Her family had been in New York for several generations, and by the time she was born, her family wasn't necessarily practicing every element of Jewish law. We know from conversations with her friends that she observed the holiday of Passover, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. But for her, first and foremost was kind of the connection she had to Jewish people that she achieved in part through her study. She read lots of history. And also the sense of connection she had to Jews, even if they came from very different class backgrounds or they immigrated from different places. A lot of other people in the established Jewish community could have said, oh, they speak another language, they celebrate the religion in a different way, that's not really us. But she felt a sense of connection and felt obligated to help newly arrived Jewish immigrants.
It was, we could say, a life of tikkun olam, a life of repairing the world, a life of a Jewish mission, but it wasn't a life of religious observance. So she had to think outside the box. And I think her way of life resonates with our contemporaries.
Ways, Emma was always an activist, and I think in some ways that activism comes out through her poems. But in the more traditional sense of what it means to be an activist, I think that really gets going in the 1880s. Emma Lazarus responds to the arrival of many East European Jews who are coming in large numbers. They're fleeing persecution in Russia, and the existing agencies don't have enough space to house these refugees as they arrive. And they're brought over to Ward's Island in the East River, and Emma goes to visit them there. Now, she can't speak to them, she doesn't know their language, but somehow she's able to connect to them.
So she threw herself into the cause of welcoming and caring for and educating and finding jobs for Eastern European Jewish immigrants. Even more importantly, she became an advocate in her writing.
Emma Lazarus is most known for the New Colossus, but she has other writings as well. And there's a phrase that she wrote that has been used by other activists, which is, "Until we are all of us free, we are none of us free." That's a call for people to take responsibility for others and to kind of understand that you yourself aren't really free if there are people who aren't free.
When we think about proving one's worthiness to be accepted into this great nation, Emma Lazarus was saying, it does not matter. We welcome any and all.
The story goes that a woman named Constance Carey Harrison went to Emma and said, "I'm collecting poems, I'm collecting drawings in order to auction and raise money for this beautiful statue that the French have sent over." And Emma says, "I don't write on command." And Constance Carey Harrison says, "But Emma, think of the refugees you're working with. Think of how they'll see this statue in the harbor as their boat comes in." And the story goes that Emma says, "Oh, I'll do it." And 2 days later, comes back with the New Colossus.
And that was the occasion for writing this poem in 1883. And right after it was written and read at this event, it was published in January in a kind of small circulation magazine, mentioned a few times, and then it sort of fell out of view. So put the clock ahead to 1886. By then, Emma Lazarus is quite ill, and she's in England, and she decides instead of writing poems, she just doesn't have it in her, she's going to edit her poems. So she writes this manuscript of her poems, and she puts that poem first. She knew it was her best poem. She knew it was the poem that would be her legacy. After Emma Lazarus' death, the New Colossus sort of fell out of the limelight until 1903, when her friend Georgina Schuyler was looking for a way to memorialize her and came up with the idea of making a bronze plaque and affixing it to the Statue of Liberty, where it can still be seen.
Over the years, I think the poem has become a lot more complex. Is it long and inclusive of every single struggle we've ever seen in this nation? No. But I think that there's a kernel of truth for everyone to sort of identify with something in that poem.
Knowing something about the context in which Emma Lazarus lived and wrote, I think it helps us to see what a remarkable poem it is, and what one person can do to change the conversation.
So what we want you to do is think about an issue that's important to you and write about it. We want you to respond to the question, if you could write a poem for the Statue of Liberty today, what would it be?
Okay, so we went to the American Jewish Historical Society and we learned all about Emma Lazarus and her poem called The New Colossus. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to think about what you want your message to be for newly arriving immigrants, or the message.
I firmly believe that young people are ready and willing and completely able to stand on that pedestal and give us the new Emma Lazarus, or the newly envisioned version of Emma Lazarus We just have to listen.
For all her storied strength, Lady Liberty weeps as she stands, as what she symbolizes is crushed to dust in politicians' hands. Her people ignore her and refuse her protection, and allow her glistening beige skin to be tarnished by hate. They allow her hope to fade to a melancholy silence, and her skin to melt into muddy green, losing its shine.
Here your words are not twisted to insults, but crafted to songs. Here the mighty arguments of peace are indestructible. Our differences unify our love.
But let one thing be clear. We welcome you to enter here with open arms. Though some may allocate for you to fail, the foundation of this country will prevail. So fear not of what is unknown, and welcome to America, your newfound home.
I think that's beautiful. And that's the hope for the children, and intergenerational, continuing to educate them about the Emma Lazarus of the world and that they are part of it.
Right, to find that Emma Lazarus in themselves.
Yes, yes.
And to bring it out, to communicate to people. Not let the politicians and the slogans blind us to the welcoming nation that we are.
And look at all the books you can. I have a new young pal where I live who comes in with his mother, and he loves to read. And I love to have conversations with him, the young, and hear his perspective and what's going on in school and what he loves. And this is exactly what that teacher is doing there. And it's precious and it's so important.
And they described Emma Lazarus too, not that before, she was an activist, as an activist. And I'm sitting next to two activists. And, you know, Michael, you've been an activist most of your life.
Yeah, fighting for the rights.
Yeah.
We did it.
What drove you? Why did you fight for people's rights?
Because nobody else would get together and do it. You get together and form a good group. And sometimes, the bigger the number, the harder they fall. And you know, we did quite a bit. We helped organize unions.
Michael and I both found our foundation in Colorado, oddly enough, and wound up, both grew up in Massachusetts and came back to Massachusetts, which is quite a
But been
hard...
activists both places.
Oh, activists every place I've been. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, even in North Africa. Oh, yes, yes. It goes with the territory. I guess it's part of our character, huh, Michael?
I guess it's
And
a
you
character.
too. What are you talking about?
Right.
The three of us are sitting right here fighting for all these things, health care.
He got a pretty big
We're
character.
gonna-
He got a pretty big character. Oh, yeah.
Here we are at the end, and we're going to say, ongoing power
Yeah,
to
it
the
is,
people.
it
We're
is.
right there again.
Just yesterday, I went up with a group of people and we looked at the Bellows Pipe Trail and the watershed for the Notch Reservoir.
Maybe we'll talk about that next week.
Right, we will. We'll do some
I
more.
think that would be
but
wonderful.
That is a local activism
Yep.
that's happening right now.
That is the most important, the
Right.
local pushing.
They're fighting,
Yeah.
they're water protectors. They're water protectors, and they're also protectors of nature. You know, there's...
Our ecosystem.
Right.
That we're all part of.
Right. What I'm seeing is that there's a logging industry that wants to get in there and cut trees, and they're sort of greenwashing it, saying that this is going to help fight environmental degradation by cutting down healthy trees and then planting new, younger trees.
We'll have to teach them about the clues they don't have. It ought to be a good program next week. Power to the people. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Yep.
Enjoy.
Happy day.
There's power in the factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in our union. Now the lessons of the past are all learned with workers' blood. Mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities and the farmlands to trenches full of mud. War's always been the bosses'